Okay, so here we've got a GUI. It's all set up as we want it, and we want to get the serial port working now. So I'm actually gonna just copy over all the code from the last project because it's basically the same. We're changing like 2 lines. It's once you can do writing, you can do the rest of it. It's really easy, you'll see. So let me cover that real quick and get back to it. Okay, so I've finished copying over the serial port code from the last project, and I'm just going to try and recap it real fast here. So if you've already seen the last project, you can skip forward. So basically what you want to grab 2 headers. You want the QSerialPort and the QSerialPort info headers. QSerialPort gives you functions to work with serialport, and QSerialPort info gives you information on the serialport. So pretty straightforward there. And then in our header here, I've got the serialport and the vendor ID and the product ID defined for the Arduino Uno. So these values here I got using this testing code, which just spits out the vendor ID and product ID for any available port. Oh, also, when you include the headers there, don't forget in your project file you need to add serialport to your qt plus gets line there, and that way it's going to find the headers. So don't forget about that. With the vendor ID and product ID, basically what I'm doing is going through the list of available ports and then comparing the product ID and vendor ID to the value for each port. And then if the values for the port match the values that I have, then I know the Arduino Uno is on that port. So I'm going to say that it's available, and then I'm going to say the port name is the name of that port. The name of the port I'm looking at right now is the one I'm going to try and open with. So if the Arduino is available, I'm going to say set the port name to the port name that I just found. And then I'm going to try and open that port in, well, last project was write only. This project we're going to change it to read only. And then you configure your port however you're trying to configure it. I did baud 9600 when I set up the Arduino, so that's what I'm doing here. And then your data bits, flow control, parity, stop bits. This is basically the minimum what you want to do when you're configuring the port. So you want to go ahead and set all of those. I explained it more in the last video though, so I'm not going to talk about that more. And then if you can't open the port, I'm just giving a message box saying couldn't find it. So let's try that right now. It's going to say, well, didn't save everything. It's going to say it can't find it. I don't have it plugged in. I should have plugged it in. Yeah, so couldn't find it. Not going to do anything. Anyways, in the destructor, also make sure that you close the Arduino if it's open. So you don't want to leave it open past your program. So don't forget to close it in the destructor. Okay, so things we're going to change here is pretty easy. We just changed the write-only to read-only mode. And then we're also going to connect a slot. So we're going to say Q object connect. We're going to listen to a signal from the Arduino called ReadyRead. and it's going to be this. And you see down here I've got just a stub for read serial. That function is going to be called anytime that there's data on the line available for us to read. I'm just going to spit something out so that we know it's working. So we'll say serialport works. What did I do wrong here? Whoops. Forgot type slot. Okay, so that's going to get called anytime there's data on the line. So we know the serialport works. Now most of the work is in the read serial function here. We need to parse the data that we're getting off of the serial line. So let's do that. So we have our read serial function here, and we're trying to read data from the serial line and parse the data. So let me add some space here real quick. Okay, so we'll do Arduino.read, and you see there's a couple different options there. We've got read, read all, read line, read data. Which one you use probably depends more on what you're trying to read and how you're trying to read it. Most of the time something like read all or read line will probably be what you want. Here I'm doing read all, and that gives us a Q byte array, and I'll call it serial data, and then I'm also going to make a Q string. I'll call it temp, and we'll get Q string from std string serial data .to std string, and then we'll do Q debug temp. So let's build that and run. And let's look at the data. So you see here the data is kind of messed up. It's not those nice numbers we were looking for. It comes in, it's chopped in half, it's unpredictable. So that actually puzzled me for a while. I was trying to figure out, maybe I had the sensor wired up wrong, or I wasn't flushing something correctly from Arduino. It's nothing like that. So here, the ready read signal. Ready read is issued when there's data available on the serial line for you to read. But it doesn't actually guarantee that the entire message is available. And that's an important distinction. So what you need to do is buffer your input. So I'm actually going to change things around here real quick. I'm going to add that Q byte array to the header, and also I'll add a Q string. So Q byte array, serial data, and I'll do Q string serial buffer. Save that. Then I'll also initialize the serial buffer to just empty string, because we're going to have to add to the serial buffer. So don't need that anymore. And here we're going to do serial buffer and we're just adding on the Q string that we're constructing. So let's run that now, and the data that we're reading from the serial line is just going to accumulate in the serial buffer string. So you see here we've got that first number is kind of messed up. That's pretty high, 233.62. Okay, yeah, I don't think it's that high here. But you see the following numbers, those all come out correctly. So if we can parse this for one of those numbers, then we'll have a number we can update the GUI with. So I'm going to split the serial buffer based on commas. And that gives us a Q string list. We'll call it buffer split. Not too creative with names right now. And then I'm going to try and grab the second element in that list, because the first one screwed up, but we know the second one had a comma before it, and it'll have a comma after it. So we just need to make sure that there's 3 elements, and then we know that the second element is good. So if buffer split dot length is less than 3, then we're going to keep reading. Otherwise, the second element of buffer split is a good value. And to show that, I'll just send out buffer split. And we also need to reset the serial buffer. Because if we don't do that, then we're always going to be reading the same value. So now that second value, we can trust that that one's going to be good. See, when it first starts up, the first value is bad, but the second value is good. So might as well write our function to update the GUI. We'll do void dialog update LCD, and we'll say UI dot whatever you named your LCD widget dot display. And then we've got a couple options there. We've got double, int, or QString. I'm going to go with QString. So we'll call that sensor reading. And let's add that to the header. And now we'll do update LCD with buffer split 1. And this should be good now. Should do exactly what we want it to do. Let's test that temperature. Got the handy glass of water. Glass of room temperature water, I guess. Okay, so didn't really change that much, but we see that that's working. That's all set up. And now you know how to read values from the serial port. So experiment with that, play around with it, and we'll see what else we can do.